It is the year 432 BC, we're at the dawn of the Peloponnesian War. The two major powers, Sparta and Athens, struggle for supremacy. Both Athens and Sparta are at the height of their power, and sure they would win in a war. In the midst of all this, the general and historian Thucydides. He spoke about the conflict, set a new bar for historians that were to come, and is our most important source of the war. Book 1, first chapter, The Causes of the War. In this chapter, Thucydides describes two events that directly led to the war. The first one is the conflict between the polis of Epidamnos and the Cercurians. Epidamnos seems to have been ruled by an exploitative upper class, and at some point the people had had enough and kicked them out. Now at this point the nobles finally became reasonable and teamed up with some barbarians to conquer the city back. The people of Epidamnos sent a call for help to their mother city, Cercuria. However, they declined, and the major polis, the Corinthians, jumped in to fill the gap. Now Corinth was the mother city of Cercuria and part of the Peloponnesian League, which was the alliance led by Sparta. Corinth occupied and defended Epidamnos, which in turn led to a conflict with the Cercurians. They did not want to lose the city to the Corinthians, and so decided to go on the offensive and attack by the sea. Apart from Athens, Cercuria was the biggest and most able naval power around, and so they won the day. Now in their genius, they came up with the great idea to pillage other territories of the Corinthians. For the Corinthians, it became a matter of honor and they had to show force and strike back hard. And so they mustered a huge army. The Corinthian soldiers were promised the land of the Cercurians, and mercenaries were also hired. At this point, the Cercurians realized they screwed up and sent envoys to Athens, requesting to become a part of their alliance in order to get protection. Corinth did the same, and so it came that both were speaking to the assembly of the Athenians. The Cercurians told the Athenians, "Well, how lucky you are! You will gain a faithful ally and a big fleet at the same time." Furthermore, it was the Corinthians that were acting unjustly, and they argued that therefore their help would not break the peace between Athens and Sparta. Every city will honor its mother city, but if treated unjustly, there is no more legal bound, since the settlers are not slaves, but equals to their relatives in the mother city. Now at this point, the Cercurians show themselves to be either the dumbest or boldest people in the Greek world, since they make this point to defend themselves, but fail to realize that the people of Epidamnos could make the exact same point. After all, their masters had abandoned them, and so they turned to another power for help. Fair enough, right? Now it came to the Corinthians to speak. They started out by calling the Cercurians the opportunists they are. For so long they had remained neutral, not belonging to either the Peloponnesian League nor the Athenian Delian League. And in doing so, they had avoided war and taxes. Most importantly, taxes. Whereas it's true that any neutral city can join any alliance, this is not legal if it directly negatively affects a member of an alliance. Furthermore, they appeal to the Athenian sense of honor and argue that they never took advantage of Athens when their allies wanted to break off. We just ask you to give back as you were given. After this, the Athenians didn't quite know what to do. They had two votes, the first one against, but the second one in favor of an alliance. They decided to send out only a few symbolic ships, which should only engage in battle when there would be an offensive act directly against the Cercurians. And so they left Athens, unknowingly, but a vital part in the Greek history they were about to play. (332 BC), somewhere in the Ionian Sea. The Cercurians are being challenged to a sea battle by the Corinthians, and anxiously await whether their ally Athens will join their side or not. If they do, it means war with Sparta. Finally, they get their answer. The Athenian ships take the right wing. Athens did not want to provoke a war with Sparta, but they also didn't want the Cercurians to lose. So the commanders gave the order to act as passive as possible. Of course, this is very difficult when engaged in a battle. And so the inevitable crash of the two powers was about to begin. To Thucydides writes, "The fighting was very fierce and more like a battle on land than anything else. This because there were so many ships and almost no space to maneuver. Because of that, the ships stayed tightly packed together. Everybody fought more with courage than ability. It was incredibly loud from all the people fighting and dying. The battle waged well into the day, until the Corinthians were finally forced to withdraw. An attempt to regroup was thwarted by the arrival of a few new Athenian ships, which the Corinthians mistook to be a whole new fleet. And so they fled ashore. The next day, neither side wanted to make a decisive move and continue the battle. In subsequent negotiations, the Corinthians were guaranteed safe withdrawal, an offer which they gladly accepted. When we last left, the Cercurians, together with their Athenian allies, were facing off against the Corinthians, a powerful polis allied with Sparta. At the beginning of the battle, the Athenians tried to stay out of the fighting as much as possible. However, this proved to be impossible, and after a long and fierce fight, the Corinthians finally lost and fled ashore. Eventually, they were granted a safe withdrawal. The Athenians were probably hoping they could still avoid war with Sparta that way. However, they were wrong, as tensions were rising not only in this region, but in northeastern Greece as well. The stumbling block was the polis of Potidea. Formerly they were allied to the Athenians, but had sympathies for the Corinthians, as the Corinthians had founded the polis generations earlier. Fearing that they might defect, the Athenians wanted them to tear down all their walls. Now, why would the Athenians make such a demand? It seems that they were hoping that by taking away all defenses of Potidea, they could prevent an uprising, since the polis would be defenseless. Now, I don't know what brilliant mind came up with such an idea, but what happens next seems pretty predictable to me. Instead of just giving up, the people of Potidea mobilized and tried to argue with the Athenian envoys. At the same time, they started negotiating with the Spartans and the Corinthians as well. Meanwhile, the Athenians were beginning to get suspicious. They sent out a detachment consisting of 30 ships and 1,000 men to Potidea. But the gates were already closed down, and, well, not everybody was really happy to see them. Coincidentally, there was a civil war brewing in Macedonia. The Athenians wanted to support their pretender to the throne, and so they turned northwards. Macedonia during that era was in many ways similar to Latin America during the Cold War. There was constant political turmoil, and the superpowers of the time were usually heavily involved into local politics. So the decision by the Athenians to get involved really was nothing out of the ordinary. Meanwhile, the Corinthians decided it was time to face the Athenian menace, and assembled an army to help out their relatives in Potidea. Their army consisted in 1,600 heavily armored and 400 lightly armored volunteers. The leader of the army was Aristeus, son of Adimantus. Adimantus had been an important general during the Battle of Salamis. This was one reason why his son could unite so many volunteers. When the Athenians heard about this, they immediately sent out reinforcements. Both armies met up at Thermi. The combined army now consisted of 3,000 men and 600 allied cavalry. Meanwhile, Aristeus had a smart plan. He decided to split up his army. He positioned one part of his army in Potidea and the other part of his army in Olynthos. Now, as soon as the Athenians would besiege Potidea, he could move out his troops from Olynthos and actually attack them from the rear. However, the Athenians thought about that too, so they split up their army as well. They sent their cavalry to Olynthos, meanwhile the rest of the army attacked Potidea. In Potidea, Aristeus moved out to face them for a fight. Aristeus commanded the left wing, where he just annihilated the Athenians. But he didn't just stop there, but followed the fleeing Athenian right wing. In hindsight, that turned out to be a mistake, because his main army actually lost the fight and had to retreat back to Potidea. Now he was trapped outside the city. In a last-ditch effort, he rallied his men and marched them back to Potidea. His plan was to break through the enemy line and to reach the city. It was a risky plan, but it was all they had. Trapped with his army outside the besieged city, Aristeus decided to gamble it all and break through the enemy lines and reach Potidea. He addressed his troops one last time.
Today the carrion birds feast, but but they will feast upon your enemies, not on the brave sons of Greece. So let your battle cry be victory, victory and honor. And remember this above all, the gods are watching from Olympus. Make sure they are not ashamed.
The plan was to break through the Athenian lines and make it into the city through a small gap between sea and land. Of course, they would have to do this under constant enemy fire. In the end, most of Aristeus' men reached Potidea unharmed. However, they were still trapped in the city. Aristeus had to come up with a new plan for himself and his men. Luckily for them, Potidea had a port. After giving it much thought, Aristeus decided to withdraw by sea. He did not fully withdraw though. He simply moved around in the area and raided several garrisons and towns. Most importantly, he sent envoys to Sparta to officially ask for help. In reality, the Greek world had already been at war. But the decision now lied with the Spartans to make it official, enter the war, and end the conflict with the Athenians once and for all.